One need new blood, not old baggage. That's what my younger brother, Travis Wittmann, said, right before he fired me in front of the entire board of directors. My name is Jake Wittmann. I'm 45 years old, and until 10 minutes ago, I was the senior project director at Wittmann Sons Construction, a company my grandfather started with a single truck and a toolbox, and one my father grew into a cornerstone of Omaha's skyline. And me. I helped push it into the top 3 commercial contractors across 3 states. I didn't argue when Travis made his little speech about innovation and forward thinking. I just stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked out. What nobody in that boardroom knew, not even Travis, was that I'd already built a quiet backup plan. I'd spent the last 8 months setting up my own company, JW Buildworks. I didn't break any contracts, I didn't take any files. I just started having honest conversations with clients I'd personally worked with for over a decade. As I sat in my truck outside that building, our family name still stenciled across the front, I opened an email from Ben Harding at Crestwell Properties. They had officially signed with JW Buildworks, a $3.2 million deal, and it was just the beginning. I pulled out of the lot without a word, driving through the familiar streets of Omaha like I had 1,000 times before. But this time it felt different. For 22 years, those roads always led back to Wittmann Sons. Not anymore. Now they were leading me somewhere new, toward something I was finally building for myself. The office I'd leased for JW Buildworks wasn't fancy, just 2 small rooms above a CPA's practice on the west side of town. The furniture was secondhand, the paint was chipped, and the sign on the door still read, Wendell Tax Prep. But it was mine. It smelled like coffee and freedom. I'd already secured a line of credit from a local bank, thanks in part to a few very reassuring reference calls from longtime clients. Ben from Crestwell was just the first domino. I'd had quiet conversations with others. Tanner from Riverview, Sophia from Blackstone Commercial, James from Westfield Properties. They weren't just names in a CRM system. These were folks I'd sat across from at kitchen tables, construction trailers, and charity banquets. They knew me. They trusted me, and more importantly, they followed me. What Travis didn't understand was that this business, construction, it isn't just about blueprints and numbers. It's about trust. Showing up on time, owning your mistakes, delivering what you promise, even when the weather delays you 2 weeks and the subcontractor skips town. Travis thought he could automate loyalty with dashboards and marketing decks. But relationships like mine, you can't download those into a spreadsheet. I started making calls to a few of the site managers and foremen I'd worked with over the years. Nothing shady. Just letting them know where I was and that I'd be needing solid people soon. Most were cautious but curious. "You really out on your own now, Jake?" they'd ask. I'd say, "And I'm looking for folks who still care about getting it done right." That was usually enough. Within 2 weeks, I had 6 job applications on my desk and 3 handshake agreements with local tradesmen I trusted with my life. The word was out and folks were interested. It felt good, strangely good to be building again from the ground up. No committee meetings, no office politics, just work. Then came the first call from Travis. I let it go to voicemail. The second call I ignored too. By the third I picked up. Not because I wanted to talk, but because I knew I needed to hear just how much trouble he was in. "Jake," he said, his voice tight. "Ben Harding just pulled the Crestwell job. Says they're going with some outfit called JW Buildworks." "That you?" I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window. "Sure is. What the hell are you doing?" "Starting something new. You know, fresh ideas." There was a long pause. I could almost hear him gritting his teeth. "These are Wittmann clients," he snapped. "They belong to the company." I didn't even flinch. No Travis, they were my clients. I was the one who showed up when the concrete trucks were late. I was the one who stayed until midnight when the permits got held up. You just saw the logos on the invoices. I knew the people. He tried to argue, tried to guilt-trip me, even hinted at a lawsuit. But I wasn't rattled. I hadn't violated a non-compete. I hadn't taken any internal documents. Everything I'd done was above board, and I had a lawyer who made sure of it. "You thought you were firing a project manager," I said calmly. "But what you really fired was the trust holding this company's biggest contracts together. And now, that trust left with me. That shut him up." I hung up. The next morning, I got a visit from Uncle Pete. He'd been Dad's right, handman for 3 decades before semi-retiring and joining the board. He walked into my humble office, looked around, and shook his head with a half smile. "Smells like ambition in here," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "What do you want, Pete?" He didn't dodge. "The board's meeting today. Travis wants to sue. Says you stole clients. Says you planned this." "Of course I planned this. I'm not stupid," I said. "But I didn't steal anything. I didn't take a single file or make a single pitch while I was still at Wittmann. These clients came to me because I earned their trust." "I know," he nodded. "But they're nervous." Travis over-leveraged the company chasing expansion. Those client projects were factored into bank loans. If the work disappears, so does the credit line. "Not my problem," I said, though my stomach turned a bit at the thought of the company folding. My father's company, the one I'd sacrificed my marriage for, the one I used to believe I'd run side by side with my brother. Pete stood to leave. "Think about this, Jake. It's not just business, it's family. If this thing crumbles, it'll hurt a lot more than just your brother's ego." I nodded silently as he left, feeling the weight of it settle on my shoulders. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my father. When I answered the call, my father's voice wasn't angry. It wasn't disappointed either. It was tired. The kind of tired that sinks into your bones when you've spent a lifetime building something and feel it slipping through your fingers. "Jake," he said, "can you come out to the house tomorrow morning? We need to talk." That was all. No lecture, no blame. Just a quiet summons. I told him I'd be there. The next morning, I drove out to the family home, a 5-acre property just outside of town. Dad bought it when Wittmann Sons landed our first 7-figure contract back in the late 80s. It was his dream space to breathe, to think, and to see the sunrise without buildings in the way. A builder ought to have land, he always said. Somewhere he can feel the horizon. Mom opened the door. Her hug was tighter than usual, and she didn't say much. She led me straight to the back porch, where Dad sat in his favorite rocking chair, staring across the frost-covered fields. The November wind cut through the stillness, but he didn't move. "Jake," he said, still looking straight ahead. "Dad." I sat in the chair beside him. For a while, we didn't speak. We just listened to the wind rustling through the dry corn stalks along the edge of the property. Finally, he said, "Your brother tells me you're trying to take the company down." "That's not what I'm doing." "Then what do you call it?" I let the question hang in the cold air. "I'm building something of my own." After Travis pushed me out, he turned then, eyes sharper than I expected. "You two were supposed to run it together. Tell that to Travis. He's the one who humiliated me in front of the board and fired me like I was some temp off the street. And now you're taking our biggest clients." "They came to me, Dad. I didn't steal a thing. I just gave them somewhere to go." He sighed and looked out over the horizon again. "The company's not as solid as it looks, son." That got my attention. "What do you mean?" He rubbed his hands together slowly, as if the truth had weight. "Travis has been borrowing against future projects. Those 5 major contracts you took, they were collateral on over $12 million in loans." I blinked. $12 million? More or less? He said. On paper, everything looked good. But those projects were the keystones. Without them, the banks are getting nervous. Real nervous. I leaned back in my chair and tried to process it. So that's why Travis was panicking. He wasn't just trying to save face. He was trying to save the whole damn company from financial collapse. "Why didn't you stop him?" I asked quietly. "I should have," he admitted. "But I trusted him. I figured I'd taught you boys well enough to run it without me watching over your shoulders." I stared at the field stretching out before us. The wind was picking up. Somewhere off in the distance, a barn door creaked open and slammed shut. "And now?" I asked. "What happens if the loans are called?" "We lose everything. The equipment, the fleet, the main office, maybe even this house if the secondary liens get triggered. You've got your own thing now, and that's good. But your mother and I, we put everything into Wittmann Sons. There's no plan B for us." His words hit harder than I expected. I'd been so focused on getting out from under Travis's shadow, so intent on proving I could stand alone, that I hadn't looked back to see who else might be standing behind me. "The board votes today," I said. "Whether to sue me?" "They do," he confirmed. "And Travis is pushing for it hard." And what do you think they should do? He turned and looked me square in the eye. I think if we go through with it, we lose more than a lawsuit. We lose what's left of this family. He stood up slowly, the joints in his knees cracking from a lifetime of concrete pours and scaffold climbs. You've always been the builder, Jake. Maybe it's time you build a bridge instead of another wall. And with that, he walked back inside, leaving me alone with the wind and the truth. On the drive back into town, my mind was racing. I had every right to let Wittmann and Sons collapse. Travis had fired me, blindsided me, and now he wanted to bury me legally. But if the company fell, it wouldn't just be on him. It hit the employees, the retirees, the vendors, the reputation my grandfather built one wheelbarrow at a time. I pulled into my modest office, sat at my desk, and stared at the blueprint spread out in front of me. The Crestwell job. My job. But it didn't feel like a victory anymore. It felt like a choice. By 3:00 p.m. I knew what I had to do. I picked up the phone and dialed Ben Harding. Ben, I said, I need a favor. Ben Harding was silent on the other end of the line. You're asking me to sit down with Travis, he finally said. The guy who fired you in front of a boardroom like it was Shark Tank. Yeah, I said. I know it's a big ask. He exhaled. Why? Because I don't want the family business to go under. And more than that, I don't want our people to suffer for Travis's mistakes. Jake, Ben said gently, those contracts are yours now. You earned them. I'm not walking away from them, I explained. But I'm trying to find a middle ground. I'm offering to split the contracts, 3 to Wittmann, 2 to JW Buildworks. Keep the bank happy. Buy them some time to clean up the mess. There was a long pause. Then Ben said, You've got more backbone than most CEOs twice your size. I'll meet him. But I'm doing it for you, not for him. Thanks, Ben. I owe you one. I spent the rest of the day on the phone with my other 4 clients. Tanner at Riverview Development, Sophia at Blackstone, James at Westfield Properties, and Victor from Union Square. They didn't understand at first. Some were flat out angry. You want me to work with the same guy who told us you were too busy to meet with us? Sophia said. You want me to trust him? I'm not asking you to trust him, I said. I'm asking you to give him a hearing. That's all. Against all odds, they agreed. By nightfall, I was emotionally drained. But there was one more call I had to make. Travis picked up on the 3rd ring. Jake, he said, his voice cautious. I've been trying to get a hold of you. I know, I replied. I've been thinking. He didn't interrupt. I know about the loans, Travis. Dad told me. There was silence, then a sigh. So, now you understand, do, I said. And I've got a proposal. I told him to meet me at my office the next morning, 7 a.m. sharp. No lawyers, no board members. Just you and me, he agreed. That night I didn't sleep much. My lawyer had drafted the partnership agreement, and I read it over at least 10 times. It was fair, some might say generous. But it had teeth where it needed to. At 7:00 a.m. sharp, Travis walked through my door. He looked worse than I'd ever seen him. Creased suit, bloodshot eyes, nervous energy barely contained beneath the surface. Why are you doing this? He asked before sitting down. After everything. I'm not doing it for you, I said. I'm doing it for Dad. For the people who've worked at Wittmann for 20 years. For the name on the building. He nodded slowly and took the seat across from me. I slid the agreement across the desk. JW Buildworks and Wittmann Sons enter a formal strategic partnership. You get 3 clients, I keep 2. That stabilizes the loan situation. He skimmed the document. Then his brow furrowed. This says I have to step down as CEO, it does. His eyes narrowed. Who takes over? Dad comes back temporarily. Only until the board can install a new neutral CEO. Someone from outside the family with experience. And what about our expansion strategy? It's done, I said flatly. No more risky plays until the debt is cleaned up and the trust is rebuilt. Travis leaned back in his chair, eyes scanning the ceiling as if hoping divine inspiration might strike. This isn't about revenge, I added. I'm offering you a lifeline. I could keep all 5 clients, Travis. Let the bank call the notes. Let the company go under. But I won't do that. I'm trying to leave something standing. He stared at the document for a long time. Then, without a word, picked up the pen and signed. As he stood, he looked at me for the first time without that smug grin or defensive smirk. I really thought I was doing the right thing, he said quietly. I thought pushing you out would help us grow. I didn't reply. Some things don't deserve an answer. After he left, I sat in silence for a long time, staring out the window at the sunrise. Then I picked up the phone and called Dad. "It's done," I said. He signed. I could hear the relief in his voice, even if he didn't say anything. The next few days were a blur. I called each client, explained the new arrangement, and assured them that they were still my top priority. Then I met with the board of Wittmann Sons to present the partnership and explain the leadership transition plan. Surprisingly, most welcomed it. Some even seemed relieved. And just like that, the lawsuit vanished. The company had a second chance. And so did we. 6 months after the agreement was signed, the partnership between JW Buildworks and Wittmann Sons was steady, if quiet. There were no press releases, no announcements. Just work. And after everything that had happened, that was enough for me. I'd settled into a rhythm. Mornings started early with black coffee and job site visits. The office of JW Buildworks had grown into a small but capable team. 4 project managers, 2 estimators, and an office administrator who somehow knew everything before it happened. We weren't big, but we were solid. And in construction, solid beats flashy every time. One Friday afternoon, I was walking the Crestwell project with Ben Harding, who still looked over each site with the precision of a man who'd spent a lifetime reading blueprints in his sleep. "You know," he said, glancing up at the steel frame rising against the skyline. "I didn't think Travis would sign that agreement." "Neither did I replied. "But I think he knew the storm he'd created. And maybe, deep down, he didn't want to see the company crash under his name." Ben nodded slowly. "Still can't believe he left for Denver." I shrugged. It was probably the right call for everyone. He needed a clean slate. So did I. The truth was, I hadn't spoken to my brother since the day he signed the papers. No calls, no emails, just silence, and maybe that was for the best. Some wounds don't need words, they just need space. Back at the JW Buildworks office, I was reviewing schedules when my father dropped by unannounced. That wasn't like him. "Got a minute?" he asked, standing in the doorway holding his old leather portfolio. I waved him in, closing the laptop. "I went to the board meeting this morning," he said. Diane gave a full update. "How's Wittmann Sons holding up?" "Better than expected." "Stable." "They're not growing fast, but they're not shrinking either. They're focusing on finishing strong, paying off the debt." "You saved that company, Jake. You might not be on the payroll anymore, but don't think for a second that it would have survived without what you did." I looked down, letting the words settle. Not because I doubted them, but because hearing them from my father meant something different. Something deeper. "I brought something," he said, placing a folded document on my desk. It was a deed. My name was on it. "That's the east parcel," he said.
5 acres now. Dad,
"I don't want any arguments. You built something, not just for yourself, for the family, for the people who depended on us, for the community. You've earned your land." I stood there for a second, speechless. That land had been part of our family's holdings since Grandpa built his first toolshed. It wasn't just dirt, it was history. "Thank you," I said softly. "I'll make good use of it." He smiled. "I know you will." Later that week, I visited the east parcel for the first time as its new owner. The sun was low golden light stretching across the tall grass. It was quiet, just the way I liked it. I could already picture it a modest structure, maybe a barn-style office, with room for community events and trade apprenticeships. A space that honored the past while building the future. That night, I stayed late in the office, drafting early sketches for what I would call the Foundry, a community building project that would mentor young people in trades, craftsmanship, and business integrity. Not everyone needs a college degree. Some just need a skill, a purpose, and someone who believes in them. Travis had always talked about legacy in terms of growth charts and market share. But I'd learned the hard way, true legacy isn't built in spreadsheets. It's built in people. In every home that stands through a storm, in every apprentice who becomes a foreman, in every handshake that holds longer than a contract. That was what I wanted now. Not revenge, not recognition, just purpose. And peace. 3 months after receiving the deed to the east parcel, construction on the Foundry had officially begun. Not a day passed that I didn't walk the site, boots in the dirt, clipboard in hand, just like the old days. Only now, I wasn't doing it for a paycheck. I was doing it for something deeper. The Foundry wasn't just a building. It was a mission, We designed it to be part workshop, part classroom, and part gathering space. Our goal: to pass on what took a lifetime to learn. How to build something with your hands, your heart, and your head. I wanted the next generation to understand that craftsmanship wasn't just about tools and blueprints. It was about showing up, doing things right, and taking pride in your name stamped on the final product. The first group of apprentices came from all walks of life. A couple of high school dropouts, a single mom looking for a new start, even a retired Marine who wanted to trade his uniform for a toolbox. I interviewed every single one myself, not because I didn't trust my team, but because I wanted them to see that this place mattered. One afternoon, I caught the Marine, David, standing in front of a nearly finished wall frame. He wasn't moving, just staring at it. "You all right?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "First time I've built something that's gonna stay standing. Everything else in my life I either broke or walked away from. That one stuck with me." Meanwhile, across town, Wittmann Sons was surviving, but just barely. Diane was doing a solid job as interim CEO, keeping things lean and grounded. The massive expansion plans Travis had pushed were long gone, replaced by a tighter focus on core services and reliable contracts. We didn't talk much, Diane and I, but we didn't need to. We respected each other's lanes. She stayed clear of my clients and I returned the favor. She sent over a couple of subcontractors who'd been blacklisted by Travis but deserved a second chance. I hired them without hesitation. Then, one crisp morning in early fall, I got a call I didn't expect. It was Travis. I hesitated before answering. Then curiosity got the better of me. "Jake," he said, his voice quiet. "You got a minute?" "That depends," I replied cautiously. "Is this a lawsuit call or something else?" He chuckled softly. "Neither. I heard about the Foundry. Saw some pictures online. It's good work. Thanks." A pause. "I'm doing all right," he added. "Denver's different. More corporate, less soul. But I'm learning." I didn't know what to say to that. So I said the only thing that felt true. "I'm glad you're finding your footing. I was wrong about a lot of things, Jake. You tried to protect the company. I saw it as resistance. That's on me. I let that sit there between us." Then I replied, "We were both stubborn in our own ways." Another pause. "If you ever need anything, subcontractors, suppliers, even an extra set of eyes, I'm around." "Appreciate that," I said. We ended the call without promises. But somehow the air felt lighter afterward, not healed, but maybe less broken. A few weeks later, the Foundry opened its doors with a small ceremony. Nothing fancy, just coffee, donuts, and a bunch of handshakes. Dad showed up, walking a little slower than before, but still proud as ever. He stood in front of the first group of apprentices and gave a speech I'll never forget. "My boys didn't always agree," he said, eyes flicking to me, "but they never stopped building. That's what matters. We're a family of builders, and this place proves that some things are worth more than control or credit. They're worth passing down." As I stood in the back of the crowd, watching young men and women in hard hats nod along, I realized something. This was the legacy I wanted. Not a corner office, not a company name in lights, but hands-on mentorship. A community. A future built one beam, one lesson, one second chance at a time. 1 year after the Foundry opened, I returned on a quiet Sunday morning. The workshop was still, the scent of sawdust faint in the air. I ran my fingers along a smooth maple bench one of the apprentices had just finished. Solid, level, proud. That's when it hit me. What we build isn't just made of steel, concrete, or wood. It's made of trust, of second chances, of choosing dignity over ego. I lost a company, a brother, and nearly my sense of purpose. But in that loss, I found something greater. Clarity. It's easy to think legacy is about your name on a door. But the real legacy? It's in the lives you shape, the hands you guide, and the values you pass on, quietly, without applause. I'm not just proud of what we built. I'm proud of how we built it with heart. Life's not about winning every battle. It's about knowing which ones are worth fighting, and which ones are worth forgiving. If this story hit home for you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Ever faced a moment where walking away led you somewhere better? Let's talk about it. And if you want more stories that remind you of the strength behind quiet resilience, hit that subscribe button and join us here. Because sometimes the quiet ones build the loudest legacies.